I got paid millions of dollars a year.
Hello everyone out there. Today I would like to review this debate between Gary Stevenson and Dave Rubin in a Piers Morgan show. The reason why I chose this debate is because although I heard lots of positive reviews about Gary's performance, I actually think that he did very poorly. The reason why I think is because Gary's message is just way too simple, and while that is great to make things simple and clear when you're speaking alone in a video during a debate, if somebody like Rubin, who's really skilled, drags you on a topic like politics or social issues, then the lack of answer can be really weaponized against you. And really, so you understand where I come from, I despise Rubin. He's lying, and through his lies, he's complicit in ruining the life of millions of people for just his own benefit. So I really think that somebody like Gary, if he wants to do what he says he wants to do, just needs to do better. And here is how, in my most humble opinion, I think he can do that. So if I'm ever so lucky as to have Gary listen to this, know that this is with my best intentions and really lots of admiration for what you're doing. So let's start listening. The debate is long. I'll cut pieces here and there to focus on important bits. But if you want to watch the full debate, I'll also add the link in the description to the original video. So the debate starts by reviewing a monologue of Bill Burr, and they start from there arguing about this topic, which I think is very meta for this video.
This is so, the amount of people that are struggling out there because of these fucking billionaires. And they got us all arguing liberal and conservative. We got to stop doing that. Like, I am so tired of hearing about people going to bed worried about what's going to happen next week. There is so much fucking money in this country. And there's so much work being done, you know. And if you work a full fucking week at a job, you should be able to pay your fucking rent. You shouldn't have to go out and get another fucking job and still be struggling. It's bad for the country. Because then the kids don't see their parents and they're not getting the upbringing that they need. It's so fucking... These fucking billionaires, they need to be put down. You know, like fucking rabid dogs. They're like rabid with fucking greed. And just going out and just dividing everybody. You know, just the fucking epitome of this time right now. Like how divisive we are.
And he goes on. It's a spectacular rant, I have to say, and it resonated a lot with people. So does this mean that we're facing the dawn of a winning new brand of economic populism or left? Should regular working voters be worried about a billionaire power grab? Which is exactly what America voted for and what it needs. What do you mean?
So do you hear what he said that? So Piers is never impartial. So what he did, he says, okay, this is what Americans voted and what they need. So basically disqualifying the previous argument. So he seems as if he's being impartial. He's trying to sound impartial, but effectively he never is. So let's continue.
Well, welcome to both of you. Not natural bedfellows, but in a way, both have very strong views about this same issue, which reflect how people are split about this, right? So starting with you, how much did that resonate with you, what Bill Burr was saying?
Well, you know, I come from a poor background. I come from a poor background in East London. My friends and my family still live in that background. So, you know, these stories of mum skipping meals so the kids can eat, people not being able to put the heating on in the winter, that's common. That's really, and I think it's important that we say that in spaces like these, because now I exist in these media spaces, and I've been to these fancy universities, I've worked in the banks. A lot of wealthy people don't see that's happening. You know, in this country, I'm talking to you right now, half the country struggles to simultaneously feed the kids and turn the heating on. That's the truth. And I know it's getting that way in America as well. So of course it resonates with me, you know. Of course it resonates with me. The poverty is out of control.
I mean, Dave, the argument will be, well, I'll let you espouse the argument you want to espouse, but one of the big arguments, of course, is that what billionaires like Elon Musk have done, for example, is they build tremendous businesses which generate tremendous amount of jobs for people to then earn good money and do exactly what a lot of people here can't afford to do. So therefore, they can be a force for good albeit obviously you're going to get bad apples. How do you see it?
Sure. Well, first, let me jump to the part that I agree with, which is that, of course, there is inequality. And would we all like to see poor people have more? And is it possible that some people have, quote unquote, too much? It's hard to agree what that might be, but I'm sympathetic to that argument for sure.
So do you hear how Dave treats Gary's argument with contempt? And the other thing he does is say, no, you're not wrong, but how you're right matters. So in a way, saying that if we don't know where this right point of injustice is, we might create other injustice. And Piers Morgan kind of gave him the cue before. No, he already painted the very rich, the very powerful as some kind of unsung heroes. So now, if your point is, if the line of injustice is drawn wrongly, then you are going to commit injustice against the greatest heroes of our generation.
And that's in my country, and that's across the pond right here. That's number one. The question really is the method that is going to free the most people and free the markets and allow people to flourish. I believe in free market capitalism. I want there to be as much competition as possible. I don't have a problem with billionaires because, generally speaking, billionaires have built things. I mean, the idea that Elon Musk is devoting this amount of time to working for the government to help make sure that the government is more efficient is pretty spectacular. If I could jump back to the Bill Burr clip for just a moment, I know Bill a little bit. We've traveled in some of the same circles. I mean, he's surrounded by all millionaires. It used to be that Bernie Sanders was always complaining about millionaires. Then Bernie Sanders became a millionaire and he started complaining about billionaires. The idea that if you just somehow magically took out, well, he also made a violent threat there, but let's put that aside for a moment. But if you somehow took these people out, or if you took 10 billionaires and you took all of Jeff Bezos' money and you took all of Peter Thiel's money and Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera, you took all of their money and you redistributed it throughout the system, that somehow 3 years later things would be better, I think is a completely faulty argument. There's way more things as it pertains to education and teaching people proper value of money and what economics really is that I think is way more important than just demonizing the billionaire class or any other class. Class warfare does not work and will ultimately lead to kind of what his bad joke was about, which was violence against these people.
So this is the end of Rubin's argumentation. He took about 2 minutes in total to make it. And what he did is to bring a lot of arguments. And then he also took the chance to muddy the reputation of the speaker in the first speech. So, and the reason why he does that, well, of course, the last part is to take away credibility. But then the reason why he can bring so many arguments to his argumentation is because, one, the people he's talking to already know these arguments, or at least they know the feeling of it. They might not understand them fully. And this allows him to just talk about it and use them as a way to bring back these good feelings that they have attached to them. And the other one, it just makes it impossible to really argue against it because it's just way too much. You know, if you really want to argue about all the things properly, it will take you days at the very least. And it's impossible. So I think from this perspective, what Gary does, which is focus on like one simple thing, is very good. And just not listening to what Dave is talking about. Basically, just do your own speech. But let's continue listen to Gary's answer.
I was a trader for a long time, and I worked with a much older trader. In the book, he's called JB. He had a good quote about these kinds of opinions. He said, opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one. Now listen, I don't get paid to have opinions, okay? I was one of the best paid and most successful traders in the world, for one of the biggest banks in the world. I put bets. I place bets. And I've been betting for 14 years that the working class in my country and the working class in your country will collapse into desperate, worsening poverty year after year. I'm a multimillionaire from doing that, from betting on that. Traders message me every day. They say what's going to happen. I say it's going to get worse. I've been betting on it since the beginning of COVID. I've made millions on it. All the best traders know. Let me explain to you how economics works, all right? You guys work in media, all right? I work for Citibank. You call up Citibank and you say, I want an opinion on what's going to happen to the economy. They pay me £2 million a year. Do they give me the phone? No, they don't. Kids like me don't get the phone. We get the money, okay? I shouldn't be here. Doesn't make no sense for me to have a YouTube channel. Doesn't make no sense for me to be here. I got paid millions of dollars a year to bet on the collapse of your working class, okay? I've walked away to come here on this show for free because I want to tell the public, the American people, this gets worse. This gets worse. Well, I'm not just saying it, I'm betting on it.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
So explain what you mean. So when you say you've been betting on it,
okay, right. So I started
explain to people who don't know the system.
So I don't like this section so much because Gary just takes way too long to get to his final message. He spends so much time talking about his own life that I forget about what his message is, largely because his own life and his story is very, very interesting. And so overall, at a certain point, it diminishes from the goal he has. He's trying to prove expertise, but he also doesn't say it directly, which is what I think he should do in a way that people can understand him. Also, so he's not necessarily an expert. He doesn't say that Dave is not an expert, or at least he doesn't say it clearly. And since his message is not necessarily in contraposition with Dave's message, it's also not clear if they are both somehow compatible. What is the solution here? Is it a summary of the two? Should we just listen to Gary and not to Dave? I think, of course, what Gary wants is we just listen to Gary, but again, that doesn't come out clearly because of how long he took at delivering his message. And I'm not sure he actually did at the end in whole. So what can Gary do better here? So I will use 3 strategies. The first one is to say the problem first, because he doesn't want to keep people tied to the chair listening to him. His life story is very interesting by itself. He doesn't really need to do that, and that will add clarity. The second one is to use an analogy, and the third one is to ask a question, because questions drive narratives. So, for example, imagine I'm Gary. I know that would be very hard because I'm not nearly as good as Gary at communicating. But Gary could say, okay, listen, Piers. Let's say you're sick and you go to a doctor. The doctor tells you, sorry, Piers, unfortunately you have cancer. And this is a list of things you have to do if you want to live. So, Piers, will you listen to your doctor or will you listen to your friendly health and well-being commentator, Dave? Of course, Pierre will not answer probably yes, I will listen to a doctor. I think he will try to change the argument to something else because otherwise it's just totally invalidating Dave, which he's on his same side. But this allowed Gary to do a few things. First of all, the analogy allows him to talk about a problem in a way that is very intuitive for people, is very visceral. You feel pain. And while when we talk about inequality, it's somehow very abstract. So he reduces the pain to something extremely concrete and something that is feelable. Second of all, he immediately set himself up as an expert which can diagnose the problem and can cure the problem. He's trying very, very hard throughout the whole interview to set himself as an expert. But with this analogy, it becomes obvious that he is the expert and the other guy is not. So he's also telling people that, well, whatever Dave said before doesn't really matter so much because he's just somebody talking a little bit out of his ass. Of course, some people might think that the health and well-being expert is better than the doctor, but what can you do about it? And then finally, the question is very important because he didn't just ask the question to peers, he asked the question to everybody else at home, even if it was not directly directed to them. I think the overwhelming majority of people, 99.9%, will listen to their doctor. And so he set himself as a doctor, and so they will think, maybe I should probably listen to him more, way more than I will listen to Dave. Okay, this is what I will do. But okay, let's continue listening to this debate and what Gary say next.
I started working in 2008, which, as you'll know, is the Lehman crisis,
right?
The collapse of the economy. And my job
Too big to fail.
My job was betting on interest rates. As you'll know, in 2008, all the interest rates went to zero. Then my job is when will the interest rates come back up, which is kind of a proxy for when will the economy recover. I'll give you a history lesson on it, right? In 2008, everybody said 2009. In 2009, they said 2010. In 2010, they said 2011. Every single year up until 2020, they said rates will recover next year, until 2020 when they finally said rates will stay zero forever. We're bad at this. We're bad at this, okay? I'm fucking good at this.
So I think here Gary does very well to set himself as an expert in a way that someone without that particular expertise will be hard to deny. But he misses a point, which is in a debate, the goal is not to set yourself as an expert, it's to set yourself as an expert compared to the other person. And he, again, didn't do that. But okay, let's continue.
All right. Why did interest rates not recover after 2008? Because people weren't spending money. Zero interest rates are supposed to get people spending. Why did zero interest rates not get people spending? I had the radical idea of going out and asking people, what do you think people say when I ask them, why aren't you spending more money? What do you think people say?
They're not spending more money because they probably don't have more money.
Yeah. And when I looked at their financial situations, what I saw, this is in early 2010s, I was in my mid-20s, I saw a generation of people, my parents' generation, who owned property, and another generation of people, their kids, my generation, who will never own property. The middle class are losing their homes, the middle class are losing their wealth. Where is that wealth going? Where is that wealth
And your
going?
argument is it's going just to the super rich.
Where else?
So they're getting... So Dave, I mean...
Well, I think it's important to make a distinction that, first off, what's happening in your country and our country are not exactly the same, but largely over the last decade, until the last month where we now have Donald Trump, both of our countries have been going in the direction of more big government, more regulation, more of the middle management nonsense that Elon Musk is uncovering every day. So I would be for removing as much of that as possible, removing as much of the waste. I mean, we are now seeing with USAID and everything else that Elon is uncovering with Doge, that the amount of waste and absolute fraud, and I would say criminal negligence in the system is a huge root of it. So I agree.
Shocking, yeah.
So again, I agree with some of the symptoms you're talking about for sure. The question is the diagnosis. So how do you then say to the person that can't afford the house, how do you afford a house? Well, one way you might want to do it is I would, if I was in charge of your country or mine, I would lower taxes for everybody. I would do a flat tax for everybody. Make sure, so whether you're a billionaire or whether you make $100,000 or 75 grand, whatever it might be, you're going to pay whatever the number is. We can all agree on the number. Let's say it's 10%. The billionaire is still paying way more in taxes. But this type of class warfare that we've been caught up in, where the common phrase always is, well, they have to pay their fair share. Well, who decides what the fair share is? And guess what? Someone will always want more of your money.
Gary?
Listen, I don't like opinions. I'm not really interested in opinions. I make predictions. What you've said you want is what you're going to get, right? Because this is the policy of the new government. Do you think living standards for your average working class American are going to improve?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, that's good. Put this on YouTube. Put this on YouTube because I'll call back.
Why are you convinced they won't?
Listen.
Okay, at first, Gary does pretty well at actually asking a question about the problem. He described the problem, described what's happening, but then Dave is so good and he muddied the waters, basically. No, he often starts, well, I recognize, yes, you're right about this, but what about all the other stuff? What about this very concrete thingy? Oh, that will solve everything. And Gary doesn't say no. Well, he doesn't say it clearly. He puts this bet on it. But he doesn't say what will happen if the bet is lost. So first of all, he should say, the problem is inequality. What you're saying is not going to help. Unless what you're saying will reduce inequality, people are going to keep suffering more and more. It doesn't matter flat tax, which, by the way, increases inequality. It doesn't matter to reduce interest rates because, it, again, increases inequality. And as long as we increase inequality, people are going to suffer more and more and more. Even if now they can get slightly ahead, they're going to suffer more and more and more later. And I'm willing to bet on it. Let's bet. I'll bet if I win, I'll shut up and never make a video again. If you win, you shut up and never make a video again. Are you that convinced that your people are going to do better? That you're willing to bet that? No, and we sign, we make a good document. This legally binding. If not, all your money. I'll give you all my money. Let's do it. The reason why you put all your money there is because that proves how fucking serious you are on this. Otherwise, it's just a guy talking about his life who wants to make people know about his life and his beautiful story. Okay, maybe he doesn't need to be that dramatic, but I'll personally find that so kick-ass. And honestly, I also would love to see Dave's reply to that. But okay, let's continue listening.
I've got a video.
Because Trump in his first 3 years before the pandemic, that was happening.
Yes, absolutely it was.
So why can't he do it again?
I've got a video, June 2020, beginning of COVID, right at the beginning of COVID, okay? What's the total US government deficit now since the beginning of COVID? Do you know? It's $13 trillion, okay? That's $40,000 for every single man, woman, and child in the entire country of the United States of America. Every single man, even the babies, all right? So if you're out there watching and you're not $40,000 richer now, somebody's got your $40,000, okay? Who? Who's got that money now? So the most amazing thing I've ever seen at the beginning of COVID, we all knew governments across the world were going to give these unbelievable, enormous amounts of money out. The UK number is just over £1 trillion, by the way. These enormous amounts of money being given out. Nobody asked the question, who's going to end up with that money? Nobody. This is $40,000 for every... Imagine if the government came and took $40,000 from everyone in the country. And gave it to somebody. Nobody did the analysis. I did the analysis.
Can you point, if you know your history, can you point to a period in UK history, for example, where massively punishing rich people by massively taxing them?
Okay, here again, Piers helps Gary with a question that is very good for him. But notice how Gary didn't actually answer a very, very important question, which is why were people feeling better when there was, during the first Trump administration? And Gary just glosses over it and talks about something else. But this is super important because that feeling that happened time ago is a rationale for voting Trump again and kind of justified everything that Trump will do. And Gary just doesn't answer to it. So this is a blatant contradiction with Gary's message. So there's a fundamental inconsistency here that Gary just cannot resolve. And I think the issue here is that his, again, message is so simple and he just struggles to adapt it to something more complex and to different scenarios than the ones he always talks about. But of course, what he's talking about is very, very important. But at the same time, because of this contradiction that doesn't get resolved, so that, I mean, the fact that people were feeling good during Trump and now they're not feeling good, this topic that he's talking about, the cash infusion during COVID from the government to the super rich, actually opens his narrative to the point that this seems uncorrelated with what Dave and Piers are actually proposing. So you might be right in a way, Gary, but because you don't say no to them, that also means they might also be right in their own way. So people who are super convinced that Gary is right will say yes. But people who are maybe in the middle or on the right will not be convinced or might actually be open to say, okay, what Gary is saying is true, but this has already happened. So maybe now, why don't we do what Dave says? Why don't we follow Trump? Because they have solutions, they are specific, and they're clear. Anna was feeling fantastic 6 years ago. Okay, so this way of speaking, this very simple narrative and not correlated at all with the topic that is being discussed, actually is hurting Gary's narrative and his ultimate goal of proposing a change in society. But okay, let's keep listening.
Has actually benefited the country?
Listen,
because I can't really.
My dad.
Okay, and then maybe this is my feeling. But Gary, could you please first give the answer and then tell your dad's life story? So I feel like if you tell such a long story first and then you give the answer to the question, which is what we actually want to know about, just gets diluted and is not as important as the story. But it's important because we're talking about facts. We're talking about a situation we want to get back. So we not need to know when that thing happened. If you first tell us the date and then you decorate it with something beautiful, then we attach that beautifulness to the date. But now that doesn't work so well in the way Gary's doing it. So I don't know how you guys feel. If you guys feel differently, please let me know.
Born in 57, he worked for the post office, Royal Mail, 35 years, never once earned more than the average wage in the country. He was able to buy a house, support a family. My parents are retired now. They own their own property. They're financially secure. That's not possible now. He lived in an era where the top rate of tax was much, much, much higher. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s in the UK, in the US, the top rate of tax on large estates was significantly higher. And in that time period, it's not a coincidence, ordinary people could afford to buy houses. They could afford to, listen, this is not normal, okay? We read your history, right? You read Charles Dickens? Charles Dickens? In this country we're talking in right now, 150 years ago, ordinary men and women lived in desperate poverty, okay? That's going to happen again. That is what, it's not normal.
I think Gary uses this reference very, very well. So here is perfectly placed. Of course, he brings us back in time to a period where there was a huge contrast between desperate poverty and incredible opulence, which is actually what Gary's saying is going to happen. So because we have also been educated about this time and this exact process, then it's very easy to believe in what Gary's saying and that this can happen again. But you see how the time was first and then the story came afterwards. So when you time travel, you time travel to a time first and then the story happens. So credit where credit is due, it was very well done by Gary.
But making the argument that 40 or 50 years ago the tax rates were higher and somehow that made things better. First off, times change. The giant middle bureaucratic state that Donald Trump is constantly fighting was not nearly as big 50 years ago. So again, I'm talking about this from an American perspective. As we're uncovering this waste, the idea that, only if we took 10% more or 20% more from this person or that person, I don't think makes sense. As it pertains to COVID, I would say, yes, COVID was a giant wealth transfer from the poor to the rich. I was against lockdowns. I was against putting people out of work.
Okay, let's cut a little bit here. I think Gary is a little bit also lucky to the fact that Dave gets into a rant against COVID lockdowns, and so later on allows Gary to talk about the things he's very good at. And we will see how he does. So let's cut this and move forward. Okay.
My parents, how much is their expenditure for? Basically nothing. Basically nothing, because their expenditure is entirely rent, mortgage, food, bills. Like, that's poor people's expenditure.
Right.
Whose expenditure falls during COVID?
The people who have normally would go out and spend a lot of money.
People who have a lot of luxury
So they
spending.
were spending.
Non-essential
They were
spending,
accumulating
right?
more money.
So if you ban luxury spending and you replace it with, as you say, government printed money, what's going to happen? That printed money is going to go to people who work in the service sector. They're going to use it to pay their bills. It's going to go to the rich people who own the corporations, who own the houses, who own the debt, and they can't spend it. What you have is basically a massive cash injection from the government through the poor to the rich. Listen.
So I think that Gary here did very well with his explanation. It's very, very beautiful. But at the very same time, he kind of dropped the ball by not also telling what's the solution to the COVID times problem in terms of the redistribution. So when he has to explain it later, once he lost the momentum of the explanation, but also he lost the visual attention that he had created with his hands in this explanation. And okay, let's keep listening.
We saw the biggest and fastest ever transfer of wealth and increase in inequality in the history of our nations, and it was immediately followed by an inflationary crisis and a collapsing cost of living. This is the clearest proof you will ever need. You don't need me, somebody who's made millions of pounds betting on this. The clearest proof you will ever need of the absolutely bloody obvious fact that if you massively increase inequality, you will decrease living standards for working people.
Well, it seems to me that the part we're agreeing on is that we all seem to agree that giant government spending and giant government control over the economy and over our lives ultimately is bad.
So, and this is a point where Gary just fails miserably because Dave just hijacked Gary's argument for why inequality is bad. And where does it come from towards the government being bad, which is what Dave actually wants to destroy. Yet Gary totally fails at saying, no, that's not what I'm saying, and actually saying the opposite. We need more government because when we had the biggest government that took care of people, that was the best time to be alive. But he just said it, and you will see even later, I think he's reinforcing Dave's argument, miserably failing his own position. But let's keep listening.
I don't blame...
Yeah, I don't really see the correlation between that reality, which we can all agree to, and the fact that it's the billionaires' fault for getting richer.
Exactly.
When actually a lot of that wealth was just accrued from...
Listen, I'm not Mahatma Gandhi, I'm not Mother Teresa, I'm not a moral philosopher. I'm one of the best economists in the fucking world at this, okay? I'm here to tell you what's happening. If you massively increase inequality, these guys, they don't just sit on that $10 trillion. They don't just sit on it. They use that to buy assets. They buy the assets that ordinary American working families need. The reason why American families, their kids can't afford homes is because they're now competing with a billionaire class that is $10 trillion richer. $10 trillion, that's $40,000 for every American man, woman,
What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that even if we were to take that premise as true, so I'll go with you on the premise, the fault would not lie within the billionaire doing something that is right. So if we're in agreement on that.
And here, Gary fell so miserably. So they basically hijacked his argument to blame the government because in Gary's own description, the only real entity with agency in this problem, in this inequality problem, is the government. So they take the chance to make the ultra-rich look totally innocent, as if they had taken no part in this squeezing of wealth from the lower class to the upper class. And Gary just doesn't say anything. He's actually confirming this, saying, yeah, I'm not angel, like I don't want to blame anyone, but you have to blame someone, otherwise your problem doesn't really exist. And I noticed that throughout all his videos. I have never heard in any of his videos a place where he says, this is not just random, this is created by the ultra-rich because they want to make more money. And it's easier to make more money by squeezing someone rather than working to create this value. And he just doesn't say anything. So Dave wins totally. He destroys, as much as I hate that, and I would love to say that Gary's destroyed him. It's not true. If you hear anybody saying that Gary won this debate, they're lying to you, or they're at the very least lying to themselves. But okay, let's keep listening to this a lot more.
I think that's
But
positive.
where does the poverty lie?
So then the
poverty
issue
lie?
really is, what would you want a competent government to do? And I think what you would want a competent government to do is make sure that there is as little waste as possible, that we're not spending money on, trans comic books in Peru, which is literally what we're finding out right now. And we're going to perhaps audit the Fed and find out where the trillions of dollars to Ukraine went and everything else. And if we have a proper accounting, the same way you run your household and anyone would run their business, then we could probably address some of these issues. But I'm glad to hear that we're not really blaming the billionaires who are just playing the game as the game is set up.
Yeah, what you want to change is the system.
Yeah, look, I'm not here to blame nobody. Listen, I'm a rich person. You're a rich person. I just met you today, but you've got a very nice suit.
I'm
I
doing
see
all
you're
right.
doing all right.
It is a new suit.
Listen,
It is a new suit.
I'll tell you what a competent government would do. A competent government would stop this massive, massive increase of inequality from accelerating out of all control.
How would you do it?
So do you agree with Donald Trump's policies on that? Because by lowering taxes, by lowering regulation, by getting rid of inefficiency, I mean, I'm with you on the premise.
How rich is Elon Musk? How rich is Elon Musk?
So again, massive failure here on the part of Gary. He still refuses to blame anyone for the problem, and without blaming someone, there is no problem. Otherwise, it's divine intervention and nobody can do anything about it. So Dave asked him, okay, so do you think that Donald Trump's actions will be good? And there's a very easy answer here, which is asking back to Dave, okay, will these actions lead to actually reducing inequality directly? Are they meant to reduce inequality? If the answer is no to any of those questions, then they will fail miserably. Gary should say Donald Trump actions will fail miserably and they will bring massive pain, massive poverty to the United States and to the very poor and to most people in the United States. If he doesn't say clearly, he's not saying it at all. Okay? So here he again fails miserably and Dave just runs laps around Gary. That's as simple as it gets. Okay, but let's go on. I'm gonna cut a little bit a section where they talk about Elon Musk, and it's not very clear or very interesting to me. So let's cut a bit forward, and now Dave asks a very good question to Gary, which is a question that is good for Gary.
Let me make you the treasurer.
With any of the things that Donald Trump's doing as per the economy or anything that we've seen in the last month,
I don't think that they're going to work. I don't think because I am somebody who has made millions of pounds betting that growing inequality will reduce living standards.
Okay, and this is something very common of people with high intellectual honesty, that they often say, I don't think something is going to happen because they cannot see the future. But he says, as honestly as you can put it, that, I don't think, but I've done it many, many times. I kept betting on it. I've been right many, many times before. I'm most likely going to be right later in the future. this is not terrible. I appreciate that. But this is something that also always strikes me with environmentalists or like environment scientists. When you talk about something so fuzzy, being unclear about your beliefs actually is not good. Look, those who already are convinced don't need you to say, I don't think. Those who are not convinced, those who are not gonna understand your intellectual honesty, they need to be convinced, they need to hear yes or no. They need to hear no, these things are not going to work. Let's keep listening.
And he's cutting taxes on the rich. Listen, let me ask you a question, right? You've already accepted, if we massively increase inequality, that can decrease living standards. If we massively decrease tax on the rich, people who make passive income of $200 million a year, do you think that will affect living standards of the middle class?
I don't know.
If they increase their ownership of wealth, if they increase their consumption of goods and services, where does it fucking come from? Listen, we have sat here in the last 5 years. We've watched the biggest ever increase in millionaire and billionaire wealth in the history of this planet, immediately followed by a collapse in living standards of the middle class, a complete collapse in the ability of ordinary people to own assets, and nobody's drawing the...
Okay, personally, I don't understand how what Gary's saying connects to the previous part, because he's saying a lot, but at the same time, and that's where Gary's passion really shines, and I just love the fact that he has this passion. It's so rare, and it's just so well framed in him. That's all I can say. Like, he just wins by charming everybody and having this raw passion for the topic that you really cannot see in Dave or Piers, you know? So points for that, to Gary for that.
Gary, let me ask you a hard question. Can you point to a country in the last century where socialism has worked?
I will point to a country where taxing the rich at a fair rate led to good living standards for working people, United States, 1955.
Okay, and that was a great answer. Straight, concise, clear, and really to the point.
Dave?
Well, I would say, again, in light of the fraud and criminal negligence that has been exposed, that is being exposed literally the second as we are recording this, the idea that we would be going in right now and saying to certain people, you should give the government more money and the government will be a good steward of those dollars, I think is completely ridiculous.
Well, we can probably all agree about the waste, right? I mean, that's a given. But
sure, but
the principle of what Gary's talking about.
I am for everyone keeping as much of their hard-earned money as possible. Piers, my guess is you have more money than me. I don't deserve your money, and I can't have it.
I sincerely hope I do, and no, you don't.
Exactly. And I don't deserve your money either. And I think that the overall concept here, which is that somehow if we can just take from these people, it's not to say that the system is perfect.
I'm not trying to take from the rich. I'm not trying to take from the rich.
But you just said you wanted to get us back to 1950s rates of tax.
I am trying to stop the redistribution. I am trying to stop the redistribution that is happening in front of our eyes. The American middle class, the British middle class is dying. Their wealth is being sucked away and is being owned by an international super rich elite who pay no tax, while the people watching this show pay 40%, 50%, while billionaires pay nothing.
Man, I listened to this part many times, and I had many different feelings each time. So actually it took me a while to understand what Gary was trying to say, and it's definitely tricky. I think he finally delivers as good as you can deliver this part. But it's definitely a very, very delicate balance between the meaning of the redistribution and taking. And yeah, that's all I can say. All right, so let's keep a bit forward. Now Piers is going to ask Gary about how much money he makes, and he wanted to ask about whether he donated his money, because that's supposed to be a good alternative to redistribution, apparently.
For me, it's enough. I've got enough money. I've got enough to do the work that I do,
give
to tell ordinary people.
Do you redistribute your own wealth?
That is the money that funds my YouTube channel. Listen,
well, tell me this now, right? When you sell a book, do you keep the money for the book?
If I give the money away, who does the fucking YouTube channel, Piers? Who pays you?
I'm not accusing you. I'm just asking you.
Listen,
do you give any money away?
Who pays you?
No, but
who pays you?
No, but Gary,
listen, you and I both know there's two ways to
The reason I'm asking you is only because your position is that there should be more redistribution to poorer people from the rich, right? And you're a rich guy who's made millions, won't say exactly how many millions. I'll work it out when I read the book.
The viewers should also work out by reading the book.
Yeah, but you know, I don't think it's unfair. I don't think it's unfair to ask you.
Of course, I want people to buy the book.
It's unfair to ask you how much you've given away.
Listen, this is the money. Who's going to pay for my kids?
What percentage?
I've quit my job to run a YouTube channel That's the money that's going to send my kids to school, Piers. That's the money.
But that
look
does
after my
sound
kids.
quite selfish.
Look, I've told you before, I'm not Mahatma Gandhi. I never pretended to be a good person. I was the best trader in the fucking world, one of the biggest banks in the world, and I made that money by betting the American middle class would be destroyed.
I get it.
I ain't here to be Mahatma Gandhi. I ain't Nelson Mandela like you, boss. I'm here to tell the American public what's happening.
But do you think you practice what you're preaching?
What I preach is to raise taxes and reduce the growing inequality. That's what I preach. Listen, I ain't here telling people. I didn't tell you to give your money away. I didn't tell you to give your money away.
You want the power, but you are, because you want the power of the state, which has the guns, to say to Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Mark Zuckerberg, we're going to take your money. We're just going to pick a number and decide how much to take. Do you give more than 1% of your money to charity?
I want the state.
You can voluntarily
ordinary
do
people
it.
from the rich.
But
And if
do
they
you do any of that yourself?
Listen, I'm not here to tell anybody to give their money away.
Right,
I'm here to tell people how to protect their class.
101. I mean, this is what the left
All right,
is.
listen, I'm going to go home and I'm going to bet on the collapse of the American middle class.
Okay, in this section, both Piers and Dave gang up against Gary on this topic of charity, accusing him that somehow he's not practicing what he's preaching because he's not doing charity. And Gary, at the end, saved himself, going back to the basics of what he's talking about, but he fails again to say no. What you're saying is just not right. I'm not preaching charity. The rich should not pay taxes because of their good heart. We want to give dignity to people, and the best way to do it, best way to provide decent lives to the people of my country is by making the very rich pay taxes. This is not about niceness, it's about justice and good life, decent life for people. This is what I'm preaching. I'm not preaching charity. I don't think anybody should do charity. I'm not doing charity because the government should take my money and give it back to the people who deserve it the most. Something like this, something on your point. Say no. That's what he's missing here. And then he kind of gets, okay, he saved himself, but by going back to the basics of what he's here to do, what he's here to tell, that's great. But has he just told them, no, you are wrong, you are not saying things correctly, he would have again had a much more impactful message for the audience. Okay, let's continue and listen what they talk about next.
And it's going to happen. And I'm here telling them it's going to happen.
Okay,
and I'm here telling them how to stop
why don't
it,
you do that and
I ain't here
donate
pretending to be a
1%
good
of your
person.
salary?
I never said I was a good person. Read the book, you can see. But I'm a good fucking economist and I'm going to be right. And you've made your prediction that living standards will increase in the next 3 years. And I've made my prediction that they won't. And we will see in 3 years who's right. And I will tell you right now, I haven't been wrong many times in the past. Listen, you're from my country, okay? You know people that look like me and sound like me don't get a chance to make millions of pounds betting on the economy, okay? There's a reason that I'm doing this, because I'm fucking good at it, okay? I don't need to be here. I could be on the beach in the Philippines.
I know lots of traders who come from working class backgrounds.
Who? Name one.
Okay, you see, he finally says no. There's a way of saying, by asking Piers, okay, name one. Tell me how, he's just calling him on his bullshit finally. And it's really powerful. Piers just loses control and he cannot answer back to it. So then Gary just gains control of the conversation. Powerful question to redirect it towards a fact. Give me a fact that what you're saying is true. Give me proof. And there was no proof, and he won. And okay, I think we can finish it here. Reviewing the debate again, I'm a bit more positive than I was at the very beginning. For me, what Gary really lacks is the ability sometimes of saying no, what you're saying is not correct. Of course, you can say it very politely and nicely, but be firm of your messaging and make sure they are not abusing it and trying to corrupt it, and you don't say no. This is not what I'm saying. This doesn't work this way. And say clearly, you can say clearly, like I suggested in other parts of this review. Also, I think if Gary had a slightly broader scope of his message, a bit on the social consequences and the politics, also will be easier for him to be more prepared as well for all these questions. Because Dave and Piers have no issue talking about this, and so it's a little bit, they have multiple weapons they can use, but Gary only has one. That's all for me. If interesting, let me know. If you have any thoughts or comments, also let me know. And thank you very much for listening, if anybody got all the way here. That's all for me. Bye.